Welcome to episode 41 on the journey to conscious healthcare. This is series 9 called Purpose and Practice, the essence of OT, and it's episode 1. In this podcast, we explore what it consciously takes to create longevity, happiness, and fulfillment in your life and that of others. The journey to conscious healthcare looks at the healthcare industry, disability sector, and how to best navigate these areas to get the best for you and your life. I'm your host, Trevor Keane, and I'm the founder and CEO of Conscious Healthcare SA, an expert company that is known for high-quality healthcare services and transforming the healthcare industry in the disability space. Today's show is also sponsored by us at Conscious Healthcare SA. Conscious Healthcare SA is now got 2 clinics, one up at Mawson Lakes up north in South Australia, and also another one down south in Seacliff. Not only that, we're very excited to announce that we've got speech pathology services, which is available for us right here and right now. And you heard it here first. Get in touch via our website and please call our team to ensure you don't have to sit on yet another wait list. Today, we're diving into the world of occupational therapy with a true leader in the field, Sarah Collison. Sarah is the founder and director of Verve OT, a pioneering provider of NDIS therapeutic support in Sydney, with over 20 years of experience spanning OT management, business development, and consultancy. Sarah was recently recognised as OT of the Year in 2023. As a thought leader in the NDIS space, Sarah has dedicated her career to transforming lives through innovative OT solutions and empowering others through training and consultancy. Her work is redefining what's possible in allied health. Get ready for an insightful conversation about leadership, navigating the NDIS, and the future of occupational therapy. Let's welcome Sarah Collison to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Well, a personal question that we had to start off with is what you wanted to do when you were growing up.
I actually wanted to be an archaeologist.
Archaeologist?
Archaeologist.
Tell us about that.
I had a real love of ancient history for some reason when I was younger, and I truly thought that that would be my profession. And for a while, I also wanted to be a professional high jumper as well. I was very into athletics as a kid, so I was debating between the 2 of those.
Oh, fantastic. And are you still involved in any of those pursuits nowadays?
Well, not the archaeology. I have been to a number of places around the world where I was like fulfilling my love of that. So I've been to Egypt, I've been to Troy, where they think Troy is, I've been to Turkey, and I've been to Greece and all sorts of places. So, but that's as close as I've gotten to becoming an archaeologist. But I did actually return to high jumping a few years ago. So at one point I was actually the New South Wales state champion for high jump in a certain age category for masters. But I actually ruptured my ACL 2 years ago, and I haven't been able to jump since then. So hopefully 2025 will be my comeback year.
Oh, fantastic. That's good to hear. And just reading between the lines there, archaeology, I suppose you've got to be quite curious in regards to that bit of investigation. It's probably no real different in regards to OT, I guess. So you're obviously in occupational therapy. You do that day in, day out. So I thought we might jump in and talk about some of the foundations of OT, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, so can you tell us in regards to the foundations of OT, what's it all built up from in regards to someone that might not know too much about OT, which is occupational therapy?
Yeah, I mean, OT is very much about capacity building and building capacity from the point of view of, I guess, how we complete those tasks of daily life and how we fulfill those roles of daily life. So all of us have different roles that we play. You know, I might be an OT, but I'm also a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sibling, I'm a friend. And, you know, to be able to fulfill all of those roles, I have to be able to perform certain tasks across the day. So as a mum, I need to be able to cook the evening meal. I need to be able to do the washing and the cleaning. And obviously as OTs, what we look at doing is how do we help people to be able to complete those tasks, to fulfill those roles that we have. And whether that's that it's been interrupted by an injury or if there's a medical condition or perhaps a disability, and it can be at any age of the lifespan, OTs will work with someone to look at what is the, I guess, the problem, what's the issue or the barrier, and how can we help them overcome that. So it can either be therapy intervention, it can be use of assistive technology, it can be modifying the physical environment. There's lots of different, I guess, tools that we would use as part of our therapeutic intervention as to how we help to build that capacity.
Yeah, fantastic. And is there a particular lens in which you might first start to assess that as far as what approach you might use first? I mean,
Mm,
obviously, we're probably talking more from a lens of NDIS or in the disability space. Is there
yeah.
a particular lens that you might overlay in which you might first start to look at approaching it? Maybe you use example of cerebral palsy, or you could be whatever sort of
Yeah.
type of disability you like. You can set your own
Look, I
example.
think I think we always start with a really holistic assessment. Often we get requests to come in and look at something very specific, and the temptation is there just to focus on that. But we know that it's often part of something much bigger. So as OTs, I guess our lens is quite wide, and we are looking at all of life. So yes, there might be a problem over here, but let's just look at the bigger picture because we might find there's something else happening that's really impacting on that. We need to address that as well. So. My lens is very much about considering the person before their disability. What is it that they want to achieve? What are the goals that they have? What are the things that they want to be able to do? What is meaningful to them in terms of the activity? And then what is it about the disability that's preventing them from doing that? And how can I then work with them to overcome some of those barriers that are being posed by that disability or that impairment to be able to move them forward? So, and I think it's always very much a person-driven approach. We used to talk a lot about person-centered. I love person-driven because to me, it just really helps us to, understand that it is being driven by the client. It's what they want. It's what they're trying to achieve or what they're striving for. And I'm along for that ride with them, but they're in the front seat. And I'm just there in the passenger seat going, okay, let's turn left here, or let's stop for a minute, or actually we might need to go back a little bit to go forward. So I really like that kind of ethos around putting that person first and working with them to identify what is the goals they want to achieve and what do we need to do to get them there.
Yeah, fantastic. So very much a person-driven approach. And would
Mm.
you be able to walk us through maybe a scenario in regards to someone that you've worked through? It doesn't have to be, we're obviously not going to call Bob Bob or whatever it is,
Yeah,
but a scenario and how that sort of played out, just to open up the world for people listening as to the impact OT really makes.
yeah, definitely. Like one of my first complex home mods clients, because I specialize in complex home mods. It's an area of practice I'm really passionate about. But was a really young boy. He was 7 years old. He had a diagnosis of muscular dystrophy, and lived in a split level, 3 level house. And,
Mm,
mum and dad were having to lift and carrying him up and down the stairs. And as he's getting older, as he's getting bigger, that's obviously becoming much more difficult for the parents. But it's also really limiting his independence and his ability to go where he wants to go when he needs to go there. So we applied to the NDIS for a lift for him, and we were successful in getting that lift approved. And I got a text from his mum on the day that the lift was commissioned of him sitting on the toilet. And I was like, oh, okay. And she said, I just had to share this with you. She said, this is the first time in his life he has been able to take himself to the toilet. Every
mm,
time he's had to go to the bathroom, someone has had to lift and carry him to take him there. And she said, and he's just so proud of himself and so excited that he could get there in his chair on his own because he could get up and down the lift. And I was like, that just makes my heart sing as an OT because it's like, all the hard work, all the stress, all the pushback from the NDIS, it is all so worth it when you get that outcome. And I think that that's what has led to me being able to stay in this scheme, regardless of all the challenges that it has, is that when you do get that outcome for someone, it just feels so good. And that's the thing I love about being an OT is making a difference for that young boy of, yeah, he can go to the toilet on his own now and everybody's happy. So
yeah, fantastic. I can sort of read between the lines there, a fair bit of self-efficacy in being able to, feel like you're able to achieve more, do more, confidence, probably build the
oh
feeling of
yeah,
being proud, like what you sort of said,
yeah,
opens up social doors and windows, so many different things there as well. And probably also like maybe better connection between family members and all that sort of stuff, like as in, I'm sure the family's very kind and caring and all that sort of
hmm
stuff, but that's also quite not I don't disruptive might be the wrong word, but if you can imagine you've got to go up and down the stairs all the time there, like as in
yeah.
that gets a better quality of life for everyone involved and greater opportunities for all by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Oh, look, as someone who, as I said, I had knee reconstruction following my ACL tear, when you are incapacitated for a period of time, you really get a good reminder of just how annoying and frustrating it is to have to rely on other people for things.
Mm,
And, for me, it was particularly my husband having to say, could you just do this for me, please? Could you get that? Could you do? And it's like that lack of being able to just do it yourself is actually just really frustrating. And it's really, it's disruptive to how you want to be able to live your life, because you're having to rely on other people all the time and you're on their schedule and what else they might have to deal with. And as I said, it's not something I would wish anyone to go through, but for me, it's that good reminder that actually, if we have someone with a disability that's constantly having to rely on others, that's not fun. We really want to be able to make it so that they don't have to have that reliance, that we can build that capacity and independence, because it just feels good. So.
Yeah, and I'm hearing the whole agency come through as well. I mean, the OT, I think, is big in regards to empowerment. If you've got that level of agency, as far as you feel like you can actually affect change and do things
Yeah.
more yourself, then, that really increases your motivation as well
Oh,
in regards to how you
absolutely.
go about things.
Yeah.
Let's jump through. So the last 5 or 6 years, been a bit of a time of change, some might say, in
Yeah.
the OT sort of space. What have you noticed over the last 5 or 6 years?
I think it's become harder. I think I started off in the NDIS space in the really early days, where they used to have, you'd go to provider things and they would have this picture of a plane in the air, and that the plane was half built, and they'd talk about how, the plane's being half built, the scheme's still new, and we've got to all be flexible about that. And for me at the moment, it kind of feels like, the plane is built, but the airport keeps moving. One day the airport's in Sydney, but the next day it's in Brisbane, and the plane's suddenly diverted and having to go in a different direction. And then the next day it's in Adelaide, and the plane's over there. And as an OT, it feels like, I guess the deliverables of what we have to do and what we have to demonstrate and what we have to evidence just keep changing constantly. And it's really hard to keep up with all the change. And I think that adds a lot of stress to the community, and a lot of feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing, and am I doing the right thing? Am I getting the best outcome? Am I a hindrance to my client? And when a lot of that is coming externally and that you have no control over it, it's really frustrating. So I think that certainly that's what I've seen over the last 5 and 6 years, that it's just become a lot more difficult to navigate the scheme. Processes should be becoming easier, but they seem to be becoming more complicated. And
Mm,
it's very hard to just do your job day to day when you're constantly trying to work out what's the next step. Why isn't it a clear process? Why is the information spread across 5 different places on the NDIS's website? Why don't we just have a really clear flow chart? Or, for a functional assessment, why can't you just give us a template of what you want? Instead of expecting every OT across the country to create their own template and then telling us you're not happy with what we're doing, well, then give us a template. It's just that frustration of feeling like we're on the ground trying to do the right thing and not getting any sort of support or guidance or assistance with that.
yeah, right. And to expand upon that, is that more so what you would say around the whole reasonable necessary? Is that more the transparency in regards to, ultimately you're trying to work towards reasonable necessary
Mhm.
for those as a underpinning principle in
Yeah.
regards to the NDIS? It's got to be reasonable and necessary in regards to for it to be funded, and social and community participation is the broader sort of picture as well there. What would, elaborating on that a bit further, is it more around that side of things, or what would you say it's more so? Like I said,
Definitely.
transparency is another thing as well.
Transparency. It's the lack of transparency about exactly what they want, and little decisions being made that aren't in black and white anywhere, or appear to be, not included in the legislation or not included in the rules. Like a really good example of one, this week. Someone's application for SDA has been knocked back because we didn't say that they met the minimum number of hours that was required for support workers. Well, there is no minimum number of hours. There's nothing in the legislation or the rules that says there has to be a minimum number of hours. There never has been. So where has this suddenly come from? It's little things like that where it's like it appears to be, incorrect or misleading information that's coming from the agency. You don't know how accurate it is. You don't know whether to believe it. You don't know if someone else has been told the complete opposite. And it happens all the time. For home mods in particular, last week we were being told, oh no, it doesn't have to be a 1500 by 1500 shower. And it's like, well, that's what's in your guidelines. Oh, well, we don't require that. Okay, but that's what's in your guidelines. This week we put in a 1200 by 1200. Oh no, it needs to be 1500 by 1500. And it's like, okay, what are we supposed to do here? Like, it's that inconsistency in the
Mm,
decision making that just makes it really hard to know, well, how do you want the evidence to come to you? what evidence do you want, and what's the easiest way of giving it to you in a way that you're going to understand it, comprehend it, and take the appropriate action for it. So I think that's where we're at the moment, is we're just really struggling with that communication and the relationship that we have with the agency to be able to have, just a streamlined way of doing things. We don't seem to have this same issue with lifetime care and support, or with eye care, or with workers' comp space. And the processes are much clearer there. The templates are clearer. It's really easy to understand what has to be done. We just don't have that in the NDIS.
Yeah, no, I can understand that sort of creates quite a lot of ambiguous. Well, it's quite ambiguous, I guess, and it makes it a little bit challenging in regards to
Yeah.
you've got funding that's getting spent on redoing work. I've heard of many a time before that you end up doing a report and then you have to end up making edits to it, and then maybe the last time the assessment was done is not within the date period that they want, but then the reviews are getting done at
Yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah.
Not
Are you
laughing because
getting
it's
builder's
funny. I mean,
quotes?
yeah, I mean,
You
like we
know,
we talk about money getting wasted and all that sort of stuff. If we've
mm,
got those sort of things that are nice and clear to us from the outset, it makes it a lot easier. And also, I think probably understanding as well how much work has to go on behind the scenes. As an OT, it's not all face to face. I mean, you
no,
might do
that's
ongoing
right.
face to face therapy, but in your space with home mods, there's a hell of a lot of liaising back and forward between builders and
Yes.
things like that as well. Have you noticed the same thing in regards to other different areas as well? Is this across the board, just in home modifications? What are you noticing?
Oh, no, across the board. So just little things that, as I said, it happens in functional assessments, it happens in the AT space. There's misinterpretation of the rules, there's misinterpretation of guidelines, there's cherry picking of information, so then it's out of context. It's just a very frustrating space to be in, and it feels like it's a constant back and pushing back and forth of, please just read this in the way it's been presented to you, and it's almost like these days you have to expect that something will go to the AAT in order for it to be approved. And if we look at the numbers that are coming out of the ART, I should say now, because it changed mid-October, but 75% of decisions that go to the ART are overturned in favour of the participant, which means that 75% of decisions are being made incorrectly by the NDIA in the first place. And if you
Mm,
compare it to the other government departments that also land up at the ART, so things like immigration and stuff like that, it's completely the opposite end. There may be 20, 25%. So we've got a real problem in this government department where 3/4 of the time the incorrect decision is being made, but nobody seems to want to address that. And obviously, when decisions are made at the ART, there appears to be no communication going back to the agency to say, don't do it again, make the right decision. And it's just, we're in this spiral cycle where it's just constant at the moment.
yeah, I've sort of wondered myself in regards to that, whether some of that is actually those that are making the decisions on the ground and the information flowing through training and assessment. I'm sort of alluding to here because I know
Mm,
I've done work in return to work, for example, and often in those backgrounds, depends on obviously the organization, but you might have another allied health discipline that's actually assessing what you're asking for. You have to end
mm-hmm.
up putting forward information saying, right, there's an extra 10 sessions or whatever it might look like, right? But there's a
Yeah.
justification. I know it's a little bit more streamlined and simpler because you tend to be working towards getting back to work. So
Mm-hmm.
in the disability space, we've got more complex needs that are there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, taking that person on that word as far as, all right, this is what we've put forward, and the other person can actually see it, for the truth that it is, and then go, right, let's work towards on that plan and getting that happening. Because I think sometimes as you said, you sort of writing these reports and you sort of don't really know where it's going to go. Like, what angle do I have to sort of go through to make this work? And what are the goalposts? If the goalposts change,
Mm-hmm.
like the airport's moving, as you said,
Yeah.
that does make it very challenging. On that, whilst we're talking about cocktails and things like that, what are the core ingredients and skills that you would say are required for being a good OT?
Look, I think you need to have very good assessment skills.
Hmm.
And by assessment skills means that you have to have a whole range of methods that you use to gather the information that you need. And that means that it's more than just sitting down and having a conversation and asking a bunch of questions. I mean, even when you're doing that, you need to be able to ask clarifying questions.
Mm.
That's a skill in itself.
Yeah, yeah.
That you get one answer, don't just move on to the next question. If there's something in there that makes you go, huh, ask a clarifying question. We have to have good skills at task analysis, actually observe people. What do they do? This is what makes us different. We have that ability to be able to observe task performance and to analyze what is happening at every step of that task. And we can identify what is the impact of disability on every step of that task, whether it's physical, whether it's cognitive. We can actually break it down and say, okay, this is where we've got the problem. Here we now need to know how to address that particular task sequence or that step. And so I think that, observation, those analysis skills are really important when we're doing that assessment. The other thing that's really important part of assessment skill is being able to actually then triangulate all the information you've gathered and make sense of it. What does it mean? The information you may have got in the interview versus what you've observed versus what you might talk to a caregiver about. And then maybe you've done some standardized measures as well. How do you actually analyze and interpret all of that to give some meaningful information? That's a real skill also. So I think a lot of the times, particularly for our new grad OTs that are coming out of university, they may have had bits and pieces of that throughout the course, but perhaps haven't had to really bring it all together to do something like a functional assessment that we do a lot of in the NDIS space. And I think that that's something that they've got to have that really good opportunity to bed down in those first couple of years of practice is how to do really good assessment. Because obviously when you do a really good assessment, it makes it super easy to write a really great report. And then report writing is, I guess, that other foundational skill that you need to have is you've gathered your evidence, you've got it all there. How do you now present that and articulate that in a meaningful way to ensure that people can understand what it is you're then recommending? So how do we actually present functional impact? How do we present to someone what the functional benefit is going to be of the recommendations that we're making? So report writing skills are really important. I see report writing as storytelling. You're telling someone's story about their life, what's happening for them, what the impact is, how we're going to fix it. What's that investment going to need to be from the agency to do that? And what is it going to achieve for this person both now and in the future? Those are really kind of key areas of practice. It doesn't matter if you're doing complex home mods or if you're doing AT or an SDA, having those core assessment and report writing skills are necessary across all of those different service streams. So that's, to me, are the really key ingredients of what an OT needs to have.
Yeah, and Sarah, in expanding upon that, could we maybe go through an example? I mean, I've spoken to many a new grad OT and lots of stuff as far as, you might have your template that you're going through, asking the question, but realizing, I think, like you said before, the clarifying question, when you find out this bit of information, when you put that with background information and some other stuff as to how that might change the course in direction, not only with how your questions might go, but what that now means in practice. Could you maybe expand upon an example to start elaborating a little bit more as to like, okay, I see this, and now that might expand upon me going in this direction as opposed to that, because that's really that clinical reasoning, that decision making, and synthesizing that information. I think, like you're saying, triangulation. I think it's the synthesis of it to then trying to get it together so that we know, all right, this is what the meaningful and most impactful thing is out of all of that together.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do this a lot in home mods that, usually when we do a home mods assessment, we start by doing that interview of, okay, tell us what's happening. And we go through everything. And, they're saying, I'm having difficulty with getting in and out of the shower. It's like, okay, well, what is it that you're having difficulty with? Is it, getting undressed and then stepping into the shower? Are you holding on to things? Is it when you're getting out because it's wet? Like, let's try and break it down a little bit. And then you're then kind of, having that conversation and then follow it up with, now come and show me, so there's the show me part as well. Don't just tell me. And that's where you then get to go, okay, I can now see what the problem is. I can see that we don't have a grab rail on the wall here, or I can see that the hob is 30 millimeters high, and that's a problem because you've got foot drop. So a lot of it to me is, those clarifying questions will give you some information, but seeing it is super helpful as well. And that's the thing I think that we need to bring in as OTs is we've got to help the agency see it as well. You can only explain to a point in a report. If it's really hard to get that message across, including photos is a really great way of bringing the agency into the room with you. Now, obviously, getting consent from the client to take the photos before you take them. But I've had the agency contact me to say about some of the reports we've done. It actually really helped me make that decision because not only did you include a photo of the bathroom, but you actually showed a photo of the transfer taking place. It was really easy to see the position that the client was being placed in by mum having to lift him in and out of the bathtub, it made it really easy for me to go, of course we need to fund modifications. So I think that that's something we need to think about, is that it's more than just, I guess, those clarifying questions. It's the follow-up in terms of then observing and looking at the task that's being performed, and then how do you best capture that and present it to the agency in a way for them to make it really easy to understand.
Yeah, gotcha. And I've really sort of dissected that myself to sort of think that as the independent thought. You might get all the information, but now we're
Yep,
finding the signal and the noise, right? Okay, hold up. I've seen this, heard that. All right, let's
yep,
see what that looks like. And now you can start formulating, okay, yeah, we're on the right track or we're not. So
yeah,
proving and disproving and doing that time and time again is what I'm sort
that's
of hearing
right.
from the process you've said there.
Yeah, I used to work in return to work, and I had this client who his doctor kept signing him off unfit for work. And I was like, I don't understand. So I went out and I did my work site assessment. I did the task analysis. His job was, he worked at a manufacturing plant. There's machinery. He had to basically use this machine that would bend pipes. And so I rang the GP to say, hey, like, I've been out to do the work site. I understand you're still signing him off. I'm not quite clear why. So I'm going to put together a plan, but just wanted to have a chat with you before I send it through. And he said, oh, well, the client told me that, his job is that he has to bend pipes all day. And I'm like, he doesn't physically bend the pipes. The machine does it for him. And he said, oh, the client made it sound like he was holding the pipes and physically bending them. I said, no. I said, I'm going to send you through the photos. I'll send you through my task analysis. It shows that he actually sits on a stool. He can get up and move around, but he presses a button, and the button then activates the machine that bends the pipes. And the GP was like, oh, okay, of course he can go back to work. That's fine. We can do suitable duties, reduced hours to start with, no problem. Like, fantastic. But it was just that, one person's perception based on what they'd been told was not accurate. And, as OTs, we can be the eyes and the ears for the agency of looking at what's happening at the moment for this person. Let me bring you into the room and show you what that looks like. And this is why they need these supports that we're recommending for you to put in the plan. And we're just wanting to make it as easy as possible for the agency to go, yep, I can see why that's reasonable and necessary, and let's just fund it. But it takes skill to be able to do that.
Oh, 100%. I think on that note, it's unpacking it, right? I don't know about how you do it, clarifying questions and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Often I'll get the information and then I'll say, all right, so what I'm hearing is that you do
Yeah.
this and then you do that. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to just work out for myself, how do you do that? That sounds like that would be challenging. And so,
Yeah.
you might lead some of the questions a little bit, but they're not being open and be like, oh, show me or things like that.
Mm-mm.
And if you're doing it in that sort of a way, you're making it now be a lot more open-ended for the person to then tell their story and what's sort of happening and their own realization, oh, I'm sort of doing this a certain way or whatever that might look like.
Yes, yep, definitely. And that's why that link between tell me and show me is really important, because it helps to bridge any of those gaps that might be still there in your head about that. I'm not quite clear about how this is being done. So, yeah.
Well, can we expand upon that then, Sarah, in regards to maybe new career therapists as to why they might find that skill particularly challenging? I mean, I'll add a little bit of a prelude into it. We get very caring types into our industry, as I'm
Hmm.
big into your Myers-Briggs and those sorts of things. But particularly, one of the things we get is we get very empathetic people, we get
Hmm.
very caring people. And so sometimes, you might have to be a bit more assertive in regards to saying, hey, is it like this or is it like that?
Hmm.
But then, we don't want to offend people. We want to obviously have rapport building and trust
Oh,
and all
yeah.
that sort of stuff. Is that part of it? Or tell me a little bit more as to why that may potentially be a bit more of a challenge earlier on or something in order to progress and to work on to be able to get more valuable information out.
Yeah, look, I think it's I mean, I came from that return to workspace first of all, where, a lot of the times we're working with clients that maybe were more capable of doing what they could do. And so part of it was about looking at what's the consistency here, in terms
Mm,
of what you're telling me versus what you're showing me versus what's actually happening. And so I think that, when you kind of, I guess, have that in your head, oh, something doesn't sound right and I need to question it more. I guess it does make you a little bit more confident about saying, look, I'm just trying to understand how this works for you. So just show me, because I do it a little bit differently, or,
Mm.
maybe someone else I've seen did it this way, and I just want to make sure that I understand it from your perspective. So I think it's really important that you explain to clients the context of why we're asking all of these questions. Why do I have to know this information? Why is it important? We've had requests in the past, for example, where we'll be asked to do a functional assessment, but told but you can't do it with the client. You're just going to do the functional assessment with the mum. And we're like, we can't do that. Like that's not a functional assessment. That's just an interview with mum. We actually need to be able to pull it all together. We need to be able to hear what's happening, to ask those questions, and then to see it in action as well, so that we can just form a really clear picture of what is the impact on function. That's what we're looking for at the end of the day. So I think it's important to be able to just explain the context. Why are we assessing in this way? Why do we have to do this? So that people can get on board with us. We get that a lot, for example, in the AT space. Why do I have to trial this? I'm sure
Mm.
it will be fine. You know what? It may well be fine, but I need to make sure that that's the case. And I need to make sure not just that it's fine, but I need to make sure it's safe for you. I need to make sure that you know how to operate it. I need to make sure that when you're using it, you're not at risk. And I need to make sure that it's going to be suitable for you now and in the future. And to do that, I have to be able to see you using that piece of AT. And so I know that it's a bit of a pain that we have to trial it. And you've already gone and done it on the weekend on your own. That's great. But we have to go and do it together. And so I think when you're able to explain that context to people and get them on board with that, that's the best way of approaching it.
Yeah, and I'm hearing very much it's the soft skills, which I
It
would say
is.
actually they're the hard skills in
They
regards to
are.
articulating, all right, hold up. This is why we need it. I mean, you've just done that perfectly, right? It said why it's
Yeah.
important, totally acknowledge the social awareness in regards to that. Yeah, that is annoying that we have to do
Yeah.
this. But if we put this report through as it is now, we end up nowhere. But understanding that, but I think that also comes down, correct me if I'm wrong, from a foundation of having very solid foundational OT skills that you're backing that
Yeah.
upon. Because if you're not sure about that, you're going to
Yeah.
speak very differently to that client or to
Absolutely.
the mum or the participant, whatever it might look like,
Yeah.
because you're a little bit unsure in yourself. So maybe that's some of the things early on to really consolidate to make sure that they're in place, so then you can speak from a level of, I don't know if assertiveness is the right word, but confidence, I think.
Confidence, yeah. And
Yeah.
look, that's 20 years of OT experience talking right there. Like, and I think this is one of the things that, I'm concerned about with some of our early career OTs is, are they getting enough time to build those foundational skills, to build those soft skills that you referred to, of having those difficult conversations, of managing expectations, of being able to explain why we do things, of being able to move through that clinical reasoning process when we have workforce shortages that are kind of forcing them to escalate into more senior levels within the OT profession before they've had a chance to do that. That's a
Mm.
real concern that I think our profession in particular has at the moment, is that I didn't become a team leader when I first moved into being an OT until probably 2 or 2.5 years of being an OT. I needed all of that time to experience all of just that clinical experience of meeting with clients and doing assessments and all those soft skills that had to happen and getting my report writing right before I could then start taking on those new challenges of now trying to supervise or lead people or review reports. And one of the concerns I have for our profession is, because we are lacking the numbers, we have our new grads and early career OTs moving into those positions more quickly. And are they getting enough time to really consolidate those skills is one of my kind of concerns.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very valid point. And maybe we should lead on to, what does that look like in practice? If you are an early career OT, what should you be looking for maybe in your first role? Or if it's not your first role, early career, what sort of things should be trying to do, get your teeth into as such, so that you can make sure that you set yourself up for success? We do it for our clients, and
Mhm.
participants. How do we do that for ourselves early on in our career?
Yeah. Look, I think it's about choosing the right role, first of all, and looking at the things that you are interested in when you first start
Mm.
out. That you'll have had hopefully a few placements while you're at university. You'll have some idea of the things that you might like. And I think it's really important to point out that, if you go into something and you try peds for a couple of years and then you realize it's not for you, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. We get great transferable skills wherever we go that we can use to move into different clinical settings. Over the last 20 years, I've worked as an OT in workplace rehab. I've done aged care, I've done medico-legal, I've done complex home mods, I've done AT. All of those things that I've gathered from each of those roles have helped me for the next role. None of them have been a waste of time. But I think starting in an area that you're really passionate about and you enjoy as a starting point is quite a good idea to do. When I went through uni, I always thought I'd be a peds OT. I got to fourth year and I was like, actually, I don't like kids very much. And so, but I really enjoyed my workplace rehab placements. And I was like, well, I think I should do that. I think that's what my first job should be, is in workplace rehab. And obviously that gave me the opportunity to get some of those foundational skills. So, but I also looked then, so after I'd chosen the right role, was about choosing the right setting. I needed to make a choice that I would get a lot of support and guidance because it was my first year out. There's a lot riding on that. And I think that that's something that's important for new grads to consider now is having access to experienced OTs, regular supervision is really important in those first couple of years. There are a lot of practices out there that are wanting to take on new grads because they're not going to pay as much as paying experienced OTs, but they don't necessarily have the structure in place to properly support those new graduate OTs. They don't always have experienced therapists that will be there as the seniors or provide that day-to-day supervision to really help address the needs that new grads have in those first couple of years. And so that's kind of one of the concerns that I've got at the moment is there's a lot of workplaces out there that are recruiting, but they're maybe not a great choice for a new graduate. So from my point of view, new graduates need to be in a place where they actually have access to experienced staff on the ground every single hour of the day. So that if something goes wrong, if they need support, they can go and access that from someone.
Yeah, perfect. I think that comes as well with a few trade-offs in regards to, say, early career and all that stuff. That might not mean that you're getting a higher salary going around, but
That's
it's
right.
I like there's a guy called the Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett, and he goes through his model in regards to the buckets and ultimately making sure that you get your skill bucket filled up first because you get to take that with you
Yeah,
wherever you go. Whereas if you're trying to get remuneration to be as high as possible, well, ultimately that without the skills is not very useful. It's not going to carry
that's
the
right.
day. So really important to make sure you end up in an environment where you can be supported. And like what you're saying, that sounds like you're in a clinic or you've got access to senior staff. You understand what does that supervision framework look like? How will I
Hmm.
develop and progress and ensure that I can not only achieve billable hours and great client outcomes, how can I develop my skills? Because
Yeah,
early on,
definitely.
that's got to be your biggest focus, you'd have thought.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right that, actually the more skills that you develop early on, and if you take that at a really graduated pace, you're eventually going to make that money back, right? If you try and accelerate that too quickly and you're seeking lots of money instead of seeking the support and the supervision that you need, you're actually going to go not backwards, but your progress is not going to be as great because you're not getting that same support that some of your colleagues might be.
No, I think
Yeah.
probably that's worthwhile expanding upon the concept of support and what that looks like because you don't want to end up
Mhm.
bunny hopping around from one organization to another, not
Yeah.
just around salaries and things like that, but like as in if you don't feel confident in yourself, that's also going to work and show itself up in regards to how you interact with your supervisor and things like that as well. Because
Yeah.
if you're coming from a place of fear or self-doubt or whatever else it looks like, as opposed to, genuine psychological safety, feeling supported. Yep, I'm
Hmm.
grounded in that, I know this, I'm open to, maybe I might actually need to look at that a little bit differently. But I think that really gives you that confidence and good bedrock for you to sort of start from.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that good support is as simple as having someone else there to talk to day. You come out of a session and maybe something didn't quite go quite right, that you know that there's a time in a day when you can go and talk to someone about that. Or if something comes up and it's actually quite urgent or immediate, you can actually pick up the phone and speak to someone. So or knowing that every month you're going to sit down and you're going to talk about your professional goals and what your plan is, and that's going to be reviewed with your supervisor, and you're going to get support to do that. That's being facilitated, that professional development and growth and nurturing. It's all really valued, and it's also being supported by the workplace that you're in. So, if you're not getting any of those things, you really have to question about how are you progressing as a clinician, if that's not happening in the workplace. You can
Yeah.
certainly do the job day to day, anyone can do that. But what are you doing to actually progress yourself further?
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious to know if we dive into support itself as a topic,
Mm.
individual, but then also, so the individual can be the person that's say the new grade or the person themselves,
Mhm.
but then organizationally as well, because I think support has got ownership on both sides of the equation, like what you bring to the table, but also what does the
Absolutely.
organization bring? Because I think that's also worthwhile having, because, if you're not coachable, for example, you might have
Hmm.
access to great support. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we've seen that before,
Mhm.
that, people, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So what does it
That's
look like
right.
from both sides there, you reckon?
Yeah, look, I think it's tricky. I mean, you see lots of organizations will advertise that, CPD allowances and budgets and things like that. And we certainly do that in our organization, but sometimes it almost feels like we have to force our team to actually go and do something. And so, we are very pro, learning and trying new things and developing new skills. But that has to come from us as well as from our therapists. And sometimes therapists, as you get to a certain point, you become quite established, you've got, very clear scope of practice. You sometimes feel like you actually don't need anything more. But I think what's important is to know that it's there if you do want something or if you need to take something up. And it can be hard if you have got therapists that aren't looking at that professional development or don't feel that it's as important as it was 10 or 15 years ago. And I guess that's an area where there has to be that respect for what the therapist is wanting to do as well. We can't force them to take CPD opportunities, but we can certainly let them know that they're available and have those conversations. So you're right that it has to go both ways. So we do quarterly CPD days at Verve, where we bring in different guest presenters and we do a whole range of topics. We try to mix it up every time, so there's something for everyone. But we enable people to have that choice about, is this something you want to come to, and if you wanted to do that. So
Absolutely. Well, let's jump on in regards to OTs having a happy, healthy, and sustainable career.
mm,
I'd say, like yourself. What have you done that you would suggest others might pay attention to that's worked well for you? I mean, you've been around for 20 years. We know,
yeah.
I keep banging on about it, 3 to 5 years is pretty common as far as how long people are in. They spend that time studying and then they
Hmm.
exit the career within a similar time period. What's had you stay around? What's worked for you and what might you suggest to others?
I think for me, it was finding that kind of area of practice that I was really very passionate about and just choosing to focus on that. So, I used to do SIL SDA and functionals and AT and home mods. And over the last few years, I've really narrowed that scope to just be mostly complex home mods. I'll still do a little bit of AT because often there's an intersect there when we're doing our home mods assessments. But I've just found that that's made life a lot easier for me. I only have to know one set of rules, one set of processes. Like I'm not trying to spread myself across multiple types of report templates. I've got my go-to phrases that I will use and things have just become a lot easier and more simplified. So I still understand and am across all of those other areas of practice because I have to be in the role that I play as an OT in the wider community. But from that kind of clinical scope, I've certainly found that that has worked really well for me. And that's why we do the same for our team is we allow them to choose what their scope of practice will be. And we find that that works really well of being able to narrow that focus down and become really good at those one particular or two particular areas of practice.
That's quite fascinating reflecting upon what you've just said there, because I think there's a level of self-reflection that comes with being able to understand that. There's a secondary
Mm,
bit, which is the emotional awareness in regards to what feels good and what doesn't.
yeah,
But then there's also a little bit of a level of ego control and all that sort of stuff, because, sometimes it can be nice to say, yeah, I can do this and I can do that. But it's just
yes,
like, hold up, what might potentially sound good and shiny object sort of syndrome type thing might not
yeah,
actually be great for your own well-being, like what you're sort of saying. Because if I'm having to be spread too thin, I
yeah,
mean, we've got very caring people, often people pleasers in our space as far
yeah.
as healthcare. Um, how have you then developed that particularly yourself? Because I suspect it probably has not been a linear journey. We talk about
Yeah,
these
I
linear
can.
journeys, but they're not often that way,
I
are
can
they?
remember the first conversation where this happened. So it was within my first year of starting my practice. And obviously, when you go out on your own, you're trying to pretty much accept anything and everything because you're wanting to obviously build a referral base and you're wanting people to trust you with referrals. And I got this particular referral, which was it was to do prescribe a falls alarm for someone who was having some issues in the community. And it wasn't until I got out there to do the assessment that I realized this wasn't actually what it was for. So it was for a false alarm, but the purpose that they wanted to use it for was not right. So they were wanting to use it because they had this young lady with a psychosocial disability who was basically calling everybody constantly. We'll call ambulance service, the support coordinator, family 20, 30 times a day. And so they thought, oh, if we give her a false alarm, she'll feel safe and secure and won't call people. And I was like, I don't think that's how it's going to work. Like, I think it's a nice line that you've drawn there, but that's actually not going to make any difference. And I said, I actually think you need a mental health OT to work with this client. And I just said, and I'm not a mental health OT. I feel completely out of my scope here. I really don't know how to address these issues. So I'm going to say, look, I think we need to find someone else, but I'm going to help you find someone. So I'm not just going to turn you away and say I can't help, but I'm going to find someone for you, which is what I did. And the support coordinator rang me the next day and she said, oh, look, I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much for doing that. I've got these 3 other referrals. I'm going to send them to you because I'm now really clear about what your scope is and what you're able to do. And I was like, fantastic. And fast forward to now, so 5 years on from that conversation, we get regular referrals still from that support coordinator for clients at this particular day program. And it's established a really trusted relationship with them because she knows that we won't take something that's outside of our scope. She knows that we won't take something where we might risk getting that great outcome for that client. And I think that that's really important is that, you know, when we make that decision to say no, it's not just self-preservation. It's actually we're protecting our client from getting a bad outcome because we don't know what we're doing. And it allows them to go and find an OT who might be better suited or a better match for their needs. And that's okay. You know, we don't need to take every single referral that comes to us. There are other OTs out there that might be better suited. And I think it works really well when we can often work with those other OTs. You know, maybe we've got someone who's doing the complex home mods and another OT is doing behavior support. And we can have those conversations and each of us are excelling in that particular area of practice that we do so well. The client is going to get a much better outcome from that scenario. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think collaboration opens up many more doors. And as you're sort of saying there, you end up getting a good outcome and sort of read between the lines there that ultimately what's written on a referral form doesn't always mean that that's what's there. You can request what you want, but you will get a professional opinion, which I think is important to value as well. It's come time towards the end here. Our last question for today is, let's pretend it's 20 years into the future.
Yeah.
And we've achieved success in the disability sector. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Paint me a picture.
Oh, what does it look like? It doesn't look like what it looks like now, is my view. So at the moment, we're going backwards in the disability sector. We are heading back to where we were 10 years ago, which is not where we want to be. So unfortunately, I feel like what's going to happen over the next 10 to 20 years is we are going to go backwards before we can come forwards again. That the government's going to realise they stuffed up. And it's going to take time for them to realise that by reducing and cutting capacity building was actually not the right decision. And so what I hope that we will have is we'll have a CEO of the NDIA who's an OT. We will have allied health spread out throughout the agency because they will finally realise that by having people on board who actually understand capacity building, we get better outcomes for people with disability. And we'll have a scheme that is successful and sustainable because we'll have actually been allowed to promote capacity building and reduce reliance on other funded supports so that people don't need expensive support workers that are costing the scheme a lot of money at the moment. So that's my hope. I will also be retired and I will be hanging out on an island somewhere in the South Pacific, but I'll be watching it from afar and going, I had a role to play in that. And I'll be really proud of the other OT colleagues that I have who I know will have had a role to play in that as well. So, but there's a lot of hard work between there and that point, and I can see that coming. So.
Oh, it's fantastic. I suspect some of them might still be watching some of your videos and training courses that you've got out. As long as they stay within date, right?
Yeah. How to sail on a choppy wave, or I'll create that from Hawaii where I'll be hanging out. So.
Well, that does bring today's episode to an end. I hope you found it educational and learned something from it. As fellow Aussies know that there's nothing worse than being stingy. So if you've got value from this, please do share this with anyone who you think might benefit, whether that be a participant, a sport coordinator, or whoever that happens to be. Sarah, before we close off, do you have any final words for our listeners at all?
Oh, I look, just stay positive, stay optimistic. If you're an allied health professional, you know, we can do amazing things, and we just have to keep pushing forward and showing the value that we offer. So hang in there, I guess.
I absolutely love that. As always, if you have any feedback, please do get in touch with us via email. Likewise, if you're after any allied health services, please get in touch with us at Conscious Healthcare SA. The details will be in the show notes, and likewise with Verve OT. Actually, how do we best get in touch with you? I can chuck the details in the notes as well if you like, Sarah.
Yeah, you can reach out directly to me via email. So sarah@verveot.com.au, or you can check out our website. So verveot.com.au and verveotlearning.com.au.
Fantastic. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.